Hey listeners, we're nearing the end of our 15th anniversary fundraising campaign, and we need your help to meet our goal. This campaign offers you a chance to win a unique food and music experience in one of the most exciting cities in America. Here's how it works. Donate to HRN and you'll be entered to win dinner for two and 2 tickets to a concert in one of 8 amazing cities: New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Nashville, Las Vegas, Charleston, Ardmore, Pennsylvania, and Asheville. All donations support our work educating food system storytellers. And when you donate, you can choose one of those cities and you'll be entered to win dinner and 2 tickets to a show. So help us reach our goal and enter to win dinner and a show in the city of your choice. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Bento Box, a full-service marketing and commerce platform that helps restaurants get discovered, make more money, and engage their diners. Join over 8,000 restaurants already using Bento Box today to deliver better hospitality. Visit getbento.com/chef today to get your first month free. That's getbento.com/chef.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guest is Jancis Robinson. We'll talk to Jancis about a very busy life in wine. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Jancis Robinson shies away from being called a wine critic, but is truly one of the most respected wine writers in the world. She is an award-winning journalist and author, penning or co-penning the World Atlas of Wine, 8th edition, Wine Grapes, the Oxford Companion to Wine, and many others. She writes a weekly column for the Financial Times and knocks out a ton of daily content on our online site, jancisrobinson.com. Jancis resides in London, England, with her husband, Nick Lander, the longtime food critic for the Financial Times, and surrounds herself with her 3 children and a slew of grandkids. And oh, did I mention, she has been a master of wine for over 45 years, helps the Queen with her wine selections, and also makes some amazing wine glasses. Welcome back to the Grape Nation, Jancis.
Well, what a nice intro. And there were no mistakes in it, which is very rare.
I got nervous for a second because I'm like, was it 3 kids or 4 kids? But you
it's
correct
3
me anyway.
And
No, I knew that. Trust
5
me, I'm
grandkids and a cockapoo.
That's a whole slew of grandkids, as I said. We're talking to Jancis remotely via our app Zencaster. Jancis, where are you right now?
I'm where I spend most of my time, sitting at my desk in London.
Okay. I just want to remind people that I had the pleasure to talk to you and Hugh Johnson in New York City. I think it was right before COVID for the 8th edition of the World Atlas of Wine. So that's the last time I saw you, and the world pretty much changed since then. So it's great to talk to you, in different times. I have a whole bunch of things that, I really want to talk to you about, pick your brain about, get your take on it. But can we talk about jancisrobinson.com first?
With pleasure.
Okay?
It's my 4th child.
Well, I was going to say, is it fair to say that jancisrobinson.com is the main artery of the heart of what you're doing right now in wine?
Very much so. I mean, it just eats up my day. And when I go to tastings, which in pre and properly post-COVID times, there are masses of in London all the time. I'm chiefly tasting to feed the monster that is jancisrobinson.com.
I didn't I didn't have it on the questions, but part of the site is there's such an extensive section of tastings. Let's talk about tastings for a second. I mean, how much wine are you tasting? Daily, weekly, monthly, annually. I mean, we just talked offline that you're going to be traveling. Um, tell me a little about your tasting, regimen.
Sure.
Do you sit down with hundreds of bottles? Do you spread it out? I mean, what do you do?
Well, like most things, COVID made everything change. But normally, shall we talk normally first?
Okay.
Because Britain until recently wasn't really a wine producer, and it was full of wine traders. London is a great place to taste wine. The world's wine producers come here and show their wares. We've got lots of importers who want to show what they've got to sell. So it actually would be technically possible to be a pretty productive wine writer based in Britain, preferably within easy reach of London, and never leave the country. I mean, it would be very sad because you wouldn't actually know what a vine looked like or go to wine regions. But we do have the most amazing opportunities to taste here. And I'm talking the full gamut from low to high from all over the world. So, I would spend quite a bit of time normally attending those sort of tastings, the ones I thought were going to yield interesting insights and tasting notes that would interest my readers. But of course, that's not enough. And I really like to travel. In fact, my very first job was in travel. And so normally, quote unquote, I would try to visit wine regions throughout the year too. Although, I mean, I'm probably going off on a tangent here, but I have to say that...
Not yet.
No, I probably am. But increasingly, I'm feeling guilty about long-haul flights. And I'm definitely feeling cross that budget flights are so much cheaper than trains when they're much worse for the planet. But there's my little tangent. Anyway, it would be traveling, tasting, and then mainly writing. And thank goodness I actually enjoy writing. But once COVID came and all those tastings suddenly ground to a halt, instead of me going to the wine very obligingly came to me. And I now live in what we call a block of flats. I suppose you call it an apartment block. And, quite high up. And God, thank goodness they've got a trolley at the reception. There was twice now a truck has come with literally a pallet of wine on it for me to taste. And I mean, in some ways, there were advantages. Like if you're at a great big busy trade tasting, you're fighting your way to each bottle, you're fighting your way to the spittoon. You can't really see the wine grow in the glass. You certainly can't try it with food. You can't see how it's going to taste the next day. So it did add a new dimension to tasting. It gave me perhaps some more insight in some ways. But you couldn't talk to every producer. I mean, every producer tried to have a Zoom with you.
Right.
Which, occasionally took up an awful lot of time for perhaps, not yielding that much. But, that's, you sort of get to know which ones are going to be interesting and which ones
personal
not.
Contact, for sure.
Yeah. And no, I tell you what I missed. I love it when you walk into a winery at harvest time and there's that smell of grapes and well, I call it the smell of carbon dioxide, but I'm told carbon dioxide doesn't have a smell. Anyway, the smell of fermentation, put it that way.
Very, very, very distinct.
Yeah, and fun. And all sorts of things. Fortunately, talking of smell, I wasn't affected by that horrid variant that makes you lose your sense of smell. I think all of us wine professionals were absolutely terrified that we weren't so scared about any other symptom, but losing your sense of taste and smell would have been absolutely awful.
In this profession of all. On the website, just tell me something about the website. I mean, when you started, you had your goal and your mission.
Sure. Well, I'm
we're
very
talking
proud of
21 years later, right?
Yes.
So I'm just curious, not so much wine, because we're going to talk about wine for the rest of the show, but sort of some of the evolutions, on the website, I would guess personnel, all those kind, where it is today that, I'm sure you're so proud of, and that's different than when you started.
It started in a very small way. It was the year 2000 when the internet was exploding, and everybody wanted to make their fortune on the internet, but most of them had no content. And I had content coming out of my ears. I had stacks of tasting notes that were just sitting on the floor of my study. And so I had a sort of steady stream of wannabe internet moguls coming to my house to sort of want to go into business with me. And I chose somebody and asked the publishers of my forthcoming book to mention jancisrobinson.com on the book jacket, and then discovered that the somebody wasn't quite what I thought. So didn't go into business with him, but jancisrobinson.com had to exist because it was being publicized on a book jacket. So I started in a very minor way with literally a guy who just helped us buy our new computer. And I found that I loved it. I loved the immediacy of it. I suppose I'm a bit of a control freak, so I loved the way I could publish what I wanted. I didn't have to wait for an editor, didn't have to wait for it to be printed, all that kind of thing. And I loved the fact that all these tasting notes I was accumulating had found a home, because previously there's a limit to how much material you can get into a Financial Times column, for instance. So it appealed to my waste not, want not ethic. And so I spent so much time on it in the first year that I thought, this is ridiculous. I mean, I have got to get
too much time?
Probably.
Was anyone else, did you notice anyone else around online doing any of this, or you were just distracted and didn't realize?
I think the Wine Advocate, Robert Parker's Wine Advocate, started went online more or less the same time.
Yeah, you're right.
There were I think I was about the third person in Britain to have a wine website. One was Wine Pages, one was Wine Anorak. But I was spending so much time on it, and I didn't want to take ads or sponsorship. So I decided I would try out a subscription-only model. So after a year, my computer advisor and I devised a way of a sort of payment method and put it online by mistake for half an hour, a bit too early. And in the first half hour, we got 2 memberships, one from Britain and one from Brazil. So we thought, maybe this has legs, And so it has proved. We've got members now in well over 80 countries. And I love the feedback, the fact that you have members on the forum and commenting on what you've written and often giving me, really good tips and things like that, and obviously sharing them with the other members. But there's quite a lot that's free. And over the years, so I was all by myself for the first 5 years. Then fellow Master of Wine, Julia Harding, who come top in the Master of Wine exams, sort of, again, literally turned up on my doorstep, said, I want to work for you. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm such a control freak. I can't imagine it having anybody work for me. And then, that's right. And then she came top in the Master of Wine exams and said, I do still want to work for you. So I said, all right then. And now we have a writing team of about 15, I think, and quite a few backroom people. And it's grown. And it is my major activity. And we post usually 2 new articles a day, 6 days a week. And about a third of them are free. the tasting
Right.
notes are for members, but there's
Right.
quite a lot there that's free. And it's lovely to see it having grown. But I did think, because I'm quite an age, I decided that I really had to look after the long-term future of it. And also I was frustrated because I was so busy writing and tasting, and I'm absolutely hopeless at, what's the modern word for marketing? You know what I mean? Selling, kind of, publicizing it and all that kind of thing.
I mean, PR, it's evolved
Yeah.
into many different
Yes.
things.
Yeah, hopeless at that. I'm just too busy writing,
Okay.
tasting, and traveling. Also, our tech capabilities were pretty limited, being just a sort of one little outfit. So I decided to look for a buyer who could really develop it, and particularly on the tech side. And so, end of August last year, found. And I also wanted to develop it particularly in the US, because it's it's easy for people in Britain to know about me, but I thought it would be a good idea to have an American backer. So sold to this very dynamic, rapidly growing company called Recurrent Ventures, who have about another 15, 16, 17 other websites, including actually Saveur is probably the closest
Very
one.
respected food magazine.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. And it's been a very good journey, and it's great. They're really supporting us, and we are growing, and that's exactly what I wanted.
So less than a year later, because you said last August, less than a year later, you took your baby and kind of shared it with someone else. As of today, and I don't think you implied anything else, you're happy with the direction and the partnership.
Yeah. No, it's
all
good.
the things
they
you
can
were,
do things
tech
we can't.
support, growth where you need it. That's great. So, things will be bigger, better, and we'll live on.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about some important issues and changes in wine that you so skillfully cover, every day. And as you said, you're churning content out. A couple of things that have caught my eye and my palate. I've gladly seen a shift in wine styles, and the most obvious is, and I, being in America, I cut my teeth on Napa and Napa cult wines, but the shift from bigger wines to fresher, producer-driven wines. I'm just curious, what has brought the change, and why about now? Not exactly today or yesterday, but in the past few years. Did people just get sick of it, or introducing?
It's really interesting, isn't it? And it's so marked pretty much all around the world, even actually in Napa Cabernets, I would say. I think some of the reason was that there was a period when the wine producers of the world were making wine to get high scores and perceived that big, bold was a way to get a high score. And I suppose those wines naturally tended to stand out in great big comparative tastings. But then I think the producers of the world realized they weren't the sort of wines that they actually enjoyed drinking, and didn't go that well with food. I think particularly high alcohol, pretty oaky wines, especially reds, can really dominate food or just clash with food. It's quite interesting, isn't it, that if you are ever at a sort of multi-course meal with wine pairings, I don't know what your experience is like, but mine is that, say it's one of those sort of marathon meals, which I actually get a bit exhausted at, that say goes on for, let's say, 14 courses. You can get to about course number 10 before you've seen a red wine, when a knowledgeable sommelier is choosing a good match for you. I'm a big believer that white wines are actually more versatile with food. So I think,
including champagne.
Oh yes,
or sparkling. For sure.
Yeah. So I think a lot of the lightening up has come from producers. I'm not quite sure that consumers said, please, please, please give us lighter, fresher wine. Although I think a lot of consumers, certainly a lot of my readers, say, please, please, please give me less alcoholic wine, because we all love the taste of wine, but we don't, and we probably want to drink quite a quantity of it without the ill effects. And, if you've got a bottle that's 15%, you've really got to watch the quantity that you drink. Whereas if a bottle is 12%, that makes a massive, massive difference.
Yeah, I mean, which is, I mean, there's a huge movement towards lower alcohol wines, which we could talk about. But when you said it was maybe more the producer than the consumer, I mean, do these guys just have the realization they wake up and say, enough of making this cough medicine? I have to make a more food friendly. I mean, when you point to the producer, I mean, what do you think drove them to, or some of them?
Well, as I say, I think it was their own personal taste that came into play there, and they were finding fresher wines more palatable and more appetizing. Because I've always
said, how important wine is to food.
Yeah, yes,
and those were not as compatible, right?
That's right. And I have always said the first duty of a wine is to refresh, not to kind of punch you between the eyes, but actually give you refreshment. I think in your country, maybe there were two strong allied forces that encouraged this trend. There was the movement was In Pursuit of Balance. Do you remember that?
Yes, the Pinot Noir.
Yeah, so it was pretty
Jasmine
much
Hirsch and Raj Parr were very much involved in it.
That's right. And they really didn't want high alcohol wines and put on tasting events that showed off lower alcohol, fresher wines. And also John Bonnet, the wine writer, he wrote
San Francisco Chronicle, right?
I think he was, yes. He left some time ago, yeah. But he wrote a book called The New California that very much celebrated newer, fresher styles. Yeah. And then it's been very evident in Australia, and the Australians have these wine shows, where all the important wine producers get together and judge each other's wines. And because they all get together maybe once or twice a year, there just needs to be one little fashion, and it ripples through the whole crowd. So, you can change the juggernaut that is Australian wine in less than a year because of the way they socialize at the wine shows. I don't know, and I do know that in South Africa, for instance, this new wave, let us call it that, is very prevalent, and I'm not sure what the drivers were for that.
Right. Well, maybe just they know what tastes good, what goes well with, maybe sort of instinctive. I don't know, but I guess, it'll unravel a little. That leads me to another point, which is also exciting to me, because a lot of people I know in the business, a lot of friends, there's been this incredible shift of planting from the normal, typical varietals, maybe European varietals, to some, exciting type stuff. Guys in Napa are doing all these Italian white varietals and blending these terrific grapes. And then you just see it, all over. I mean, I did a panel at Raw Wine yesterday for Croatian wines, and it's just crazy, the grapes there, and they're planting Syrah, which is interesting. But do you see that everywhere, where people are moving towards some newer varietals?
Very much so, all over the world. I think it's a movement that mirrors perhaps the trend towards heritage tomato varieties and apple
heirloom,
varieties, and things like that. We want indigenous now. I mean, I can remember my BBC Two series we filmed all around the world, and the last shot was in 1995. I was standing in the Errázuriz vineyard in Chile, and I finished off the whole series. It was a 10-parter, saying, I have seen the future of wine, and it is Cabernet and Chardonnay, because everyone at that stage was ripping out their local grape varieties and planting just a tiny handful of international ones. Because at that stage, the wine producers of the world were all going in the same direction. They all wanted to make copies of top French red Bordeaux and white Burgundy, hence those two varieties. And then again, I suspect it was the producers who got bored with making, such a narrow range of wines. But gosh, the movement this century has really been marked. And in fact, in 2012, with Julia Harding and a grape geneticist, Dr. José Vuillamos, we brought out a book called Wine Grapes, in which we wanted to profile every single grape variety that was making a wine in commercial production. And we ended up with 1,368 different varieties. That's how rapidly things changed. And there were, all over the world, people were resurrecting old varieties and celebrating what was local rather than trying to copy France. And honestly, I think we would love to do a second edition at some point. And I'm sure.
Are there that many more grapes to add on, plus
Absolutely.
updating?
Yeah,
wow.
You bet. I mean,
because the book is,
it's massive.
Yeah. So, I mean, is there such a word as it'll be more massiver?
It will be massiver. Yep.
Yeah.
maybe it's got to be purely digital. I don't know. But I think there would definitely be 1,500 and possibly more, particularly in Italy. They're just reviving different grape varieties all over the place, but not just Italy, Greece, Portugal, right. Spain. Yeah.
I mean, new regions in Portugal, like Alentejo, that people don't think of. There's all that going on.
Yeah.
The other thing that, kind of leads into this, I mean, you said the word indigenous, which is nice because I think you're right about it being producer driven. It's like, why shouldn't I grow grapes that historically grew here or make sense growing here or, match the
and that are presumably comfortable here, well adapted here. Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into, something that's important to me and to you, which is, sustainability. If you're just planting European varietals, you're probably treating them because you're trying to knock them out. But, you talked about sustainability and it plays into the farming thing because you said sustainability isn't just farming organically or biodynamically, which is pretty damn good. But you call for more of a overall holistic approach.
Absolutely.
And I think that points to a lot of things, like bottle size, and other things. I think preserving the earth, and taking care of it is important. But, talk to me about, that holistic overall approach.
I'd love to. I've got so many facets to it. Staying in the vineyard for a second, last night I went to the launch here in London of a new non-profit called the Regenerative Viticulture Foundation, which is a kind of step further on than sustainable, because sustainable is just going to leave us where we are now, which is not in a great place, actually, when you look at the health of soils and the lack of biodiversity and the pressure on water and, not to mention carbon emissions and what's happening to the climate. And the idea behind regenerative viticulture is that you actually make it better rather than sustain it. And in particular, you work away at the health of the soil, because that's really where everything happens. And you need healthy soil and the microbes in it, and mulch on the top to keep the water in it and all that kind of thing. One of the speakers actually was a very well-known Oregon wine farmer. We should really call her that, Mimi Castile, who grew up on Bethel Heights. Have you spoken to her?
I have not, but I plan to. We've been talking.
She'd be a great interviewee.
Yeah.
And so that's one aspect. All sorts of things have to happen in the vineyard. another.
So just don't take care of it, make it better.
Exactly.
Which is really the highest and current form of regenerative
and
right
build
now, which
it
is great.
for the future.
Right.
Yeah. But then there are people. You need to, wine producers need to look after their laborers, their workers. There's finance. Make sure you're making enough money to survive and prosper, which may well involve us consumers paying a bit more, because nobody would pretend that farm workers are paid particularly well, or that there is a surfeit of them. I think we're going to have to. Yes, there'll be some mechanization, but I think we're going to have to look more carefully at the whole economics of wine production.
Yes.
Then there is my not being a wine producer or a wine grower. I sort of have to look at what I can influence, and since you probably know, I'm sure, that the biggest carbon footprint of wine is not actually in the vineyard or cellar. It's all to do with glass bottles and how the transport and production of them. And that's the biggest carbon emitter. And if we can use lighter bottles, which bottle manufacturers show are perfectly strong enough and do the biz, we will be helping wine's carbon footprint immensely. And
but what's the pushback? I mean, is it just history and the aesthetics that the presentation of our wine, this wine, is in this massive, masculine, chunky bottle? I mean, it doesn't have any effect on anything, right?
Absolutely none. And I think it's just people haven't thought about it or realized. Right. It's been actually quite recent that anyone's looked at the whole life cycle of wine and realized how
Jancis
bad.
Bottled water has done it. They make thinner plastic, smaller caps. Not that that's a great thing, but at least it's getting better. Do you feel that, change is upon us, or we're not there yet as far as people?
At long last. I mean, there are pockets of places and people that haven't realized what this is all about, and still think that it's a really clever marketing ploy. Yeah. But I think more and more consumers are understanding that heavy glass bottles are completely unnecessary. They're also really hard work for people who have to lift them. And I think the message is getting through. I have been campaigning against them since 2006, so I wouldn't say it's been an overnight success, but right. I'm really seeing more and more people aware of the issues now. And actually, yes, you probably need a glass bottle for a wine you're going to age for 10 years because it's a neutral material. But you don't need a glass bottle for kind of everyday supermarket wine. Because the virtue of glass is over time, and most wine that's sold in the whole world is drunk within days, if not hours, of purchase. And it could just as well come out of a can. You've got a very vibrant canned wine market, haven't you?
It's very much growing. There's also boxed wines. I mean, is that a fair presentation?
Pouches. Yeah.
I mean, you're talking like 3 liters in one box, so that's 3 less bottles.
Yeah. 4 less bottles, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely an area to go. Hopefully, bigger wineries that do a lot of production may move to those type of vessels.
Recycling, of course. I think the US has a pretty dismal recycling rate, unfortunately, and Britain's a bit better, but it's not nearly as good as some continental European countries. So you can either have returnable bottles or really get to work on how easy it is to recycle. It's a complex business, and unfortunately, we're not going to save it, during our conversation.
I read somewhere, I mean, sustainability, for everyone, for you as personal. I think I read that you're in the business of traveling and you're going to be embarking on traveling, but, traveling is a big, user,
Mm.
makes a big carbon footprint. I mean, do
Mm.
you look at that and say, my contribution is maybe I should travel less or cut
Oh
out
yes, absolutely. I'm
unnecessary?
very, very aware. As think I said at the very beginning, I'm getting more and more guilty about
Yeah.
flying, and
Yeah.
I don't understand why budget airlines are so cheap, and the alternatives like rail, which are so much better for the planet, tend to be so much more expensive.
Right.
Our one little contribution to the atmosphere is that since we had our car stolen about 15 years ago, we haven't replaced it.
Is that true?
Yes.
Well, only in London. I don't think you could do that in Omaha, Nebraska.
No,
But
I know.
I get it, because I lived in New York so long. You definitely, can get around. There's ways to get to the airport and back, and certainly to all the restaurants. Anything else that on sustainability, that we don't want to
Oh,
leave
I'm
out of the
sure there
discussion?
is. I think it's just getting the message out about
Yeah.
heavy breakable glass bottles, which take up an awful lot of room, and they're not, being round and then with the kind of neck. There's an awful lot of wasted space in any package with um, glass bottles in it.
Right.
Another thing that I've been campaigning against is, because I receive a heck of a lot of bottles, styrofoam, which
A lot of packaging.
you just can't recycle it. It goes to
No.
landfill. And now I'm thrilled that there are so many cardboard, really secure ways of packaging wine bottles in cardboard. So there's no excuse for using styrofoam anymore.
Yeah, I've seen some creative iterations of that, and I'm starting to see way less. I've seen 3, 4, 5 presentations of, a 12 and a 6-pack. It wasn't just the standard thing, which is, very cool. You had mentioned something earlier when you talked about the website and recurrent media. To me, that looks like you made a further commitment to wines in the U.S. I recently had Elaine Shucom Brown on.
Oh, good, yes.
And she had already been appointed your U.S. editor.
Great.
So tell me a few things. I mean, Elaine has been around you for years, so that was logical. Why the focus on the U.S.?
Because there are so many of you, and you speak English.
Wait, but I mean, let's get the business part out of the way for a second. It's definitely a growth market, right? So more coverage which you're deserving of. So you make the right commitment. But what's compelling here? And you make the decision. Now you got to get up, and what are you going to write about? I mean, there's always stories floating around your head or topics. What's important right now about
Well,
US?
Elaine's job is she's executive editor US, and so she's writing a lot of material about, particularly but not exclusively, California wine. In fact, she's been writing about New York sparkling wine, and she's got something on the go at the moment about hybrid grape varieties, which are increasingly important in the Midwest and in the East. Well, actually, pretty much all over the US apart from California. And we have a really bright young woman, Samantha Cole Johnson, who's an Oregonian. And I first came
They were
across,
just up there, I think.
That's right.
Samantha and Elaine.
Together. And every summer we have a wine writing competition, which on jancisrobinson.com, which is really, really popular. And we have a different theme each year. Sustainability was the theme 2 years ago. Old vines was the theme last year. And I think we're going to make regeneration the theme this year. Great. And one year we had a theme which was write a wine lover's guide to a particular place. And the first time I came across Sam Cole Johnson, she submitted a wine lover's guide to Portland, because that was where she was living at the moment, Portland, Oregon. But she's since then been filing great articles. She interned in wineries in Oregon, Barossa in Australia, and Napa. And so we had some fantastic reports from there. And now she's been appointed our Pacific Northwest specialist. And
Oh, great.
she's moved up from Napa back to Oregon. And I'm really pleased with the stuff she's been filing from there. And she's, poor thing, embarked on the Master of Wine course. So, and she's very interested in viticulture. So we'll be getting a lot of material from that, I'm sure.
A lot of work ahead there.
Yeah.
Also, I have to say that Elaine has a very keen eye and sense of important issues, social issues in and around the wine world. And
Absolutely.
she is really,
we're
a
very,
terrific
very
voice.
keen on that. Yeah.
Yeah, which, I think is great.
And again, a lot of these things are like awareness. When I was saying before, people just weren't aware that there was any disadvantage to heavy bottles. And, it's been...
Right.
And I wouldn't say that for my first decades in the wine world, I was conscious of how very white it was and what a narrow slice of humanity were sort of the major players in wine. And we really got to fight that. There are lots of
Jancis, that's a show that me and Elaine could do. That would be a 3-hour show on that point.
Well, maybe
that's come to light through the last couple of years too. Maybe the pandemic put a spotlight on it too.
Well, I think probably George Floyd put a spotlight on it.
Yeah,
but no, it's
good point.
I think
the pandemic
Elaine
and the George. Yeah,
we're sort of doing our best. But I think you should probably count me out because I'm the wrong sort of person. We should get some of these.
And I'm
really
not sure
bright...
I could carry the moderating, so I agree with you. But it's something that continues to have the need to have the attention. How could I not sit here and talk to you and pick your brain about wine specifically? And I know what you do and what interests you is tracking what's going on, but also tracking, what's up and coming, in wines and wine regions. And, again, we can go on, but talk to me about a few things that I guess are, exciting you right now or top of mind, particular wines, regions. I think that people look towards you, for that kind of direction.
Well, we certainly, all of us, love an underdog. I would say we kind of champion the up and coming. We certainly cover the classics, and we endlessly cover each new vintage on Primeur and things like that. But if ever a lesser spotted Vermentino from Peru hoves into view, then we're on it.
Are they really making Vermentino in Peru?
No, I just made that
okay. That to me, never heard that. Go ahead.
They may
but
be.
If they did, you'd be right on it.
Yes, that's right. And Peru certainly has a growing wine industry. It's not just Pisco there, although I love Pisco, I must say.
Right.
If ever, for the last couple of years, I think, if people had said, where should I be looking? I do put a focus on both Greece and Portugal because they've both got this wonderful array of indigenous grape varieties. And the sort of wines that they're making are not just copies of anywhere else. They are truly unique. And their winemaking prowess is fantastic. They're not to be looked down on. They're making some seriously good wine. I think I'm sad because I'm speaking to you in the US. I would like to mention South Africa because I just don't think it's getting as much traction among American wine lovers as it deserves.
I agree. And that goes to retail and sommeliers. I hope that escalates, to your point.
Yeah.
Now, why? Tell me, tell me about why those wines excite you.
There's a lot of old vines there, and there is a specific scheme to keep old vines in the ground and celebrate them. And in fact, there's a seal over the top of the bottle that shows if the wine has been made from vines more than 35 years old. And in theory, and it's usually true, that they're making more concentrated flavour that way, more interesting wine. Lots of old Chenin Blanc vines, bush vines that do very well in a dry climate there, which are producing wines. I can't remember who I was discussing this with the other day, but we agreed that actually South Africa is now making better Chenin Blanc than most of the producers in the Loire Valley where Chenin Blanc comes from.
That's a bold statement.
Yes, yeah. I can't remember who I'm going to have to back me up on that. I have to try and remember. And just there's a lot of, I mean, they have the most awful problems in South Africa. There's a terrible economy and an unsympathetic government, sadly, and terrible social problems. But they are making very good wine, and they need our money to keep those vines in the ground and keep wine farmers afloat. So I would strongly advise any wine-interested listener of yours, which I hope they all are, to look carefully at a good importer, a good in a good wine store. If it's just a very ordinary.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. The way for people to access wine is to find a good retailer, is to communicate properly with a sommelier, or even to become familiar with an importer that may have the sensibilities of the type of wines that you like. I mean, don't you agree with that? There's probably somebody in the U.S. who's importing more South African wines than others.
Yeah,
it's like
if people say to me, I like wine, but I don't know much about it, and I want to learn more about it,
what do you tell them?
I should tell them, visit jancisrobinson.com, get one of my books, blah, blah. But actually, or I might say nowadays, since February, sign up for my BBC Maestro online wine course. But I don't.
Let's talk about that. That's another. When we talk about your projects, did that start yet? I mean,
it was launched in February. I think it launched.
Okay, so that's
in
very
the US,
recent.
Maybe earlier this month. It was I think that's a kind of staged launch, but it should definitely be available.
So tell me about, what you're doing, because, your segue was good on that. I mean, we want people, and I didn't mean that facetiously. I mean, we want, like you brought up Greek, Portuguese, and South African wines. Those are incredible wines. You describe why they're so good. And I always hate to say this, but the quality to value is also terrific.
Fantastic.
On all of those wines. But we got to, finding more out about wine. What are they going to get when they go to the Maestro series?
They get nearly 6 hours of me wittering on about wine.
Wittering.
Some of it filmed in Burgundy in beautiful vineyards and Domaine Dujac cellars. And it's split into, I think, 25 separate little lessons. And, you just access what you want to watch when you want to watch, and you go back to it and as often as you want.
Describe, what are the lessons? Are they on grapes, wines, regions,
yes.
What are some of the topics?
Yes. They're the sort of what you would expect. Grapes and how to taste, the perfect wine glass, which of course is the one I designed. And it is backed by 40,000 words full of wine notes, because there's so much detail in wine that you can't get it into even 6 hours of spiel.
So you're saying the series is supported by, like you said, 40,000. There's additional stuff to enhance,
which is sort of like a small paperback, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think people, when they finish, they have a hunger and an appetite. Where do I get more? And, it's waiting for them. So if people, let's do the proper plug on that. If people should be piqued and interested, where do they go?
They go to BBC Maestro, Maestro. And I think, and if you just Google BBC Maestro courses.
Yeah, people or BBC Maestro Jancis, they'll definitely come up.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you do something like that, I want to talk to you about a couple things. Has there been a shift in the drinking age of the wine consumer? Is it getting younger? Is it millennials? Is it younger than millennials? Is that the guy that is going to these series, or is it just me? And then I want to talk about, you and I have seen the evolution of the internet. And the internet has even evolved to social media on the internet. Where's the wine consumer going? I mean, I know the big collector has money and he's educated, but I think a lot of these Greek, South African, and Portuguese wines are going to appeal to a younger audience because they like stories. They may like the regenerative winemaking. Yeah. I mean, is that happening? I mean, are you conscious of that and how you write and what you're?
Yeah, there are definitely.
Well, I know
wine
you are.
influences.
That was an obnoxious question. I know you're. It's more of how do you, how do you approach it?
Well, I try to make friends with the kind of good influencers. I think there are two sorts of influencers, aren't there? There's the paid influencer who.
Right.
Just says what they're paid to say. But there are also some great people who say what they genuinely think. And for younger wannabe wine writers, there aren't that many opportunities. I mean, here am I. I've been sitting in my perch at the Financial Times since 1990, and I enjoy it. And I think they're quite pleased with me. So I'm not creating an opportunity for anybody. Perhaps I ought to step aside, but I won't.
Well, that's
for the next few weeks
thing.
Anyway.
Don't be so hard on yourself. It's one job.
But no, well, newspapers of wine columns have been closing at a great rate. So there aren't that many opportunities for any young person who wants to get into wine writing. And I have to say that if I was starting out in my career as a wine writer now, I think I'd have far fewer opportunities than I did when I started in 1975. Then
really,
papers were wanting to have wine columns. Certainly in Britain, the population was falling in love with wine. I've been really lucky that my career has mirrored Britain's infatuation.
Yeah, that's
with
a
wine.
good point. Yeah,
but I think there are a lot of younger people who are turned off wine, and I'm not surprised, given that you can only, by and large, buy it in a 75 centiliter container. So that's kind of 6 to 8 drinks. And for heaven's sake, you need a special implement
to that
to
point,
get
you're
into
saying,
it.
To that point about the 750 milliliter, that's not conducive to maybe a younger wine drinker.
Yeah,
it's too much, and it's like I can't drink or buy that much, or it's too expensive even.
Too expensive, yeah. I mean,
so packaging and marketing could be an important way to.
Absolutely, I think cans, cans that just offer 2 smallish drinks are a great way to go, and it's not a massive outlay, and more and more good wine is finding its way into cans too.
Yes, definitely, for sure. So I just want to make sure, I mean, when you look at the internet, which I think is great because that's where like a JancisRobinson.com lives on. People listen to podcasts. But social media, I mean, do we think it's good for wine? I mean, generally, all this blathering out there on social media platforms, is that generally good for wine?
I don't know. I
think that's the right answer. I don't know either.
I tend to be too busy doing what I do to spend much time. I have a Twitter account. I've got quite a lot of followers.
Be sitting there posting and lurking on other stuff.
But I just don't spend a heck of a lot of time. I admire those who do it well, and I like the interaction. And so far, Twitter has been a positive experience.
But you have your community with the website, with your
Yeah.
You have all those platforms to talk to people, so you're not
Mm.
isolated from it, which is a good
Yeah.
thing. But then again, that's the internet. There's a couple more topics I want to just cover quickly, and then we got to wrap up soon. But we do a thing called the wine list, where I ask all my guests the same 5 questions. I've done it over 200 times. And if you've forgotten, I subjected you and Hugh to this when we were sitting up in Hachette a few years ago. So we're going to get to that in a minute.
Did you know that over 70% of diners research a restaurant online before ordering from or going in person? Your digital front door is more important than ever. Let Bento Box design and build you a beautifully branded website. Bento Box websites provide sleek design and seamless content management, creating impactful first impressions and converting visitors into customers. And with built-in commerce and marketing tools like online ordering, gift cards, automated email, and more, you can also grow your revenue and keep your diners coming back. Join over 8,000 restaurants that leverage Bento Box to power their digital presence and deliver great hospitality. Visit getbento.com/chef today to get your first month free. That's getbento.com/chef. This episode is supported by HRN business member Food Karma Projects, dedicated to community building by creating unique food events that showcase the best local food, chefs, beer, and wine. Get fired up for the return of Brisket King NYC to taste the very best brisket, pastrami, brisket tacos, sliders, and more. It all takes place on Wednesday, April 20th from 6 to 9 p.m. outside at Pig Beach in Gowanus, Brooklyn. To purchase tickets or for more information about this Meat Lovers Fest, visit brisketking.com. Food Karma Projects supports HRN's creative educational reporting and storytelling that drive conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place.
You brought it up, and I just want to reiterate it. I mean, you've been at the Financial Times for over 32 years. You're chugging out a beautiful weekly column. I'm just curious, because we spent a lot of time talking about the website. How do you juggle subject matter, and, how do you differentiate? Is it 2 different audiences in your mind, or it's an opportunity to cover 2 different things? I mean, you don't want the same thing on both platforms.
No. But they are quite complementary in that if I write in the FT about a certain subject, there's no way I can include the tasting notes that sort of would prove my point, if you like.
Right.
So I can publish a nice big rambling tasting article with masses of tasting notes, but then publish a more succinct, like 1,000-word piece that makes the point that is demonstrated by the tasting notes, if you like. But when
is it hard to be succinct? Like, is it hard to get it to the 1,000 words, or
I think I'm so used to it now. I do write naturally to about 1,000 words, and I get a bit confused if ever anybody wants 3,000 words. No, it's become my natural length, I think. And when I'm choosing topics, I suppose there's a certain, you want to have something original. You don't just want to write what somebody else has already written.
Right.
Try and tie it to something newsy, although we have quite long lead times, so it can't be extremely newsy.
Right. There's a difference right there.
Yeah. Whereas on the website, you can. I mean, sadly, one of the things that I do is write obituaries, sort of very quickly, which is very sad. But, I have got the memories and have known an awful lot of people. So when choosing the FT topics, I try to alternate, between classic, maybe, French classics and more outre and, mind-bending stuff. But the website and the FT are very similar in terms of their readership. They're both global, and they are both, I think, probably people who are reasonably interested in wine. So I think so. I hear from other wine writers in Britain that their editors say, never mention a wine that costs more than £10 a bottle. But the British are quite tight-fisted, I'm afraid we are. But I think with the FT, I can, mention quite
Right.
a few wines that cost quite a bit more than that sometimes. I try and alternate it.
Yeah. I see it that way. I mean, I see them both as, great sources, and I don't see them crossing over. I do see them as complementary. I'm excited, to see what you're going to be writing about in the Financial Times. There's something, I guess, because I'm an older guy, about opening a paper and seeing a story than just hitting a website. Lastly, and you brought it up, but I just want to follow up on it. I recently interviewed Michael Mosbruger from Schloss Goldelsberg
Oh, yes, lovely wines, yeah.
up at Skurnik Wine Importers in New York. And, I asked him to bring a bottle of wine, and the Skurnik people pulled out a few glasses, and they were the Jancis Robinson collection, which I'm surprised because they have a lot of stuff up there. And, they had your glasses. And I thought they were terrific. So it's the Jancis Robinson collection. You collaborated with a famous designer, Richard Brendan.
That's right.
A lot of wine people want to make wine or, do
I'd
other
be
things.
hopeless at
What
making
compelled
wine.
you to, want to get into glassware?
I didn't want to get into it at all. I mean, Richard, this very bright young designer who'd had success designing other things, wanted to design wine glasses and knew that he needed some expert advice. And everyone was telling him he ought to come and see me. I didn't know it. So he came to see me and proposed this. And I said, nah, I don't do hardware. I just do words. But he was very nice and very persistent. And his team was very young, lively, not sort of corporate, good sense of humor. And I thought, well, actually, I've been tasting wine for that stage for, more than 40 years. I have pretty strong views on wine glasses. So, okay, if you're going to fall in with my ideas, let's do it. And what I think he was quite taken aback when I said, I only want to have one glass. I was
going to say, it's a minimalist approach. There's
That's
not
right.
a lot of, there's not a lot of SKUs there. There's a couple of glasses and a couple of decanters, right?
That's right. But which of us has unlimited storage space? And from the point of view of wine, I don't see any logic in serving white wine in a smaller glass than red wine. And I'm thrilled to see that the champagne producers, those who make port and sherry that I really admire, they all want their wines to be served in a proper wine glass, not in a sort of tall, thin flute for champagne or a tiny little thimble for port. So honestly, I just have that one glass, quite a lot of them, and love them. And the nicest thing that happened to me was that my oldest friend's son got her some for her birthday, and she's not a wine person at all, but she's also quite acerbic. She doesn't hand out compliments readily, but she sent me this email saying, I can't believe how much better my cheap Pinot Noir tastes in your glass.
That's what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Mission accomplished.
Exactly.
So that's the Jancis Robinson collection, and they're pretty much available everywhere. I mean, online. So certainly if you want to simplify your life, take it from an expert, have the right glass, not take up a lot of space, and have a decanter, look for that stuff. All right, we have to wrap up, but I'm not going to let you leave without answering our wine list, and I
can't remember anything about it.
I have them in front of me. So the first question, and I think we may have answered it during the interview, but the first question is, what are you drinking now? What's in the fridge? What are you curious about? What's on the table that you have to taste? What are the few things right now that
well,
in this window?
On my desk at the moment are the remains of a mug of cold tea, no milk, love tea.
Okay.
Nearest to me on my covered tasting bench are 4 cans of South African wine from an outfit called the Copper Crew, which I must taste tonight. They are flanking a tiny little sample bottle of, just hang on, a Clos de Vougeot 2020 sent to me by Sotheby's. They're trying to flog them in some fancy sale. And I suppose they want me to write a
It's a
tasting
nice
note on
wine,
it.
Jancis.
Sorry?
That's a nice wine.
Yeah. But I rather like the juxtaposition of it with
Yeah,
the
I
cans
like
of
it.
South Africa.
So you have a Burgundy and you have, as we talked about, South African and in a can, right?
Yeah.
All right, so those are two good ones. I'll take those. This question is the goofiest question in the batch, and I know you don't remember what you said, but I'm very curious how you answer it this time. Do you have a favorite wine in a food pairing? Not something you eat every night, every month, but and not what you recommend as a good wine and food pairing, but something you like, a glass of wine in that food. That's just that ooh-ah situation.
I'm very liberal on food pairings. As I think once you've got some experience of eating food and tasting wine, you have a little computer in your head that you're not aware of that automatically matches them pretty well. And I taste so many different wines that I'm finding it really difficult to answer your question.
So you want to know what you said
Yes.
a few years ago?
Tell me.
I will read it because I have it in front of you. Jancis said she's not the world's biggest food pairer. So
Didn't I just say that?
It's similar now that, that's your sensibility. But I mean, listen, your husband is, an elite food evaluator. You're around food and wine, you're always pairing, but the way you approach it, that's a fair answer. All right, here's another one for you. The third
I'll tell
question.
you what, I mean, just to add to that, I think giving the public the idea that they must get the right food with the right wine is a bit terrifying. And I'm always trying to encourage people into wine. And I don't, so that's one of the reasons that I'm
right. So don't box it into, it has to be this. If you like a big, bold Napa cab with salmon or whiter fish, fine. Right.
But I think that computer in your head will probably stop you doing it once you've had much wine.
Right. All right. So third question. The question is your favorite wine restaurant and our bar. Now, I don't want that to be a tough question for you because if you pick something, that doesn't mean that's number one or your favorite. If you leave something out, you didn't do it on purpose. If somebody comes up to you and says, I listened to the Grape Nation and you didn't mention my place. That's not what this is about. I'm just curious. Are there any places that stick out to you that the list is that impressive and the knowledge of the people that serve it and you walk in and the vibe is terrific? I mean, does anything stand out to you that way?
Well, obviously, our son's 3 restaurants and his wine bar are top of the tree.
Let's name them, please.
Portland, which has a Michelin star, Clipstone, the Quality Chop House, and then the wine bar next door is called Quality Wines.
Is that fairly new, Quality Wines, or
Quality Wines is relatively new? Yeah, it's the newest.
I read somewhere. Yeah.
But
those are all those. They get it right as far as what they're serving, how they curate it.
Yes, but I have to also nominate somebody in London called Nigel Platts Martin, who has a little group of restaurants again, the Glass House, La Trompette, and the Ledbury, and I may have missed one out. And he makes sure that he has great staff and really, really good wine.
That's what the question is. Not one of the 3, but all of the 3. Good people, good wine, good knowledge, good vibe, all of that. All right, those are all great. And
Shea Bruce is the other one of his. Shea Bruce, CHEZEZ,
right?
And the food there is really stunning too. I can never make up my mind what to choose.
So I forgot to tell everyone that I post the answers on our social media, and our listeners love to get great intel from you.
Good.
All right, fourth question. Favorite all-time wine? When I structured the question over 5 years ago for the podcast, I was really curious about, hey, Jancis, what's the rarest, most expensive wine you ever tasted? Now, that could be the answer, but the questions evolved more to what was that wine that was important to you, to your career, gateway, life-changing, made you aware. Can you think of a wine or two?
Well, the wine that opened up my eyes to how good wine could be was a Chambol-Musigny Les Amoureuses 1959, which I tasted when I was a student at Oxford. And it was just so
There
sublime.
you go, early in the game.
Yeah.
Very impressive wine. Can I tell you what else you said when we did
Probably
this a few years
Cheval
ago?
Blanc 47.
Bingo. That's it. One thing I know you probably are is consistent. So, but that Chambol music, that is really, the answer that I was. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. All right, last question, and then we got to wrap up. And I think you're as capable, if not more than anyone, to answer this. So the question is, recommend to me the best wine around 15, 20, 22 bucks American. Recommend a red and a white. You could recommend a category like Muscadet is a great value, white category, Portuguese reds, things like that. I always say my kids are in their late 20s and they're beyond drinking crappy wine and spending, 11, 12 bucks in a supermarket. They can't show up at a party or give a gift, of a wine that's not thoughtful, but they can't spend 40, 50 bucks either. So give me your ideas, in that range on a red and a white.
Yeah. Well, for white, let's go with a South African Chenin Blanc. And if it says bush vine on it, that's a good indicator that it's...
What does that mean, bush vine?
Bush vine, it means it's not trellised, it's not up on wires.
Oh, okay.
It's growing like a bush. And that probably means that the vines are quite old.
Right.
So I would nominate that category. And there's a very wide choice. Ken Forrester was a pioneer of taking Chenin Blanc seriously, so you could look out for Ken Forrester Chenin Blanc. Then with the red, how about, this is great value, a Spanish Garnacha, which is the same grape as the Grenache of Châteauneuf-du-Pape in the Southern Rhone. And the Spaniards used to be very snooty about Garnacha. They thought only Tempranillo grapes were any good.
Oh, okay.
But they were wrong, and they've seen the error of their ways. And there are, again, lots of really old Garnacha vines growing in not very grand regions. So and they go the kind of light, fresh, but sweet. And quite round, not lots of tannin. So really easy to drink young. So
Sounds
I'd
like
just
it would be
say,
popular.
Yeah, just look for Garnacha. Could be from Gredos, Gredos, but there are lots of other places.
Yep. I mean, as a category, Garnacha from Spain is going to bring you a good wine at a good value.
Yeah.
Perfect job on that. Like I said, I'm going to post everything. Good. Let me do a quick wrap up, and I want to get some final info from you, just backtracking a few things. So if you have a question, suggestion, wine happening, or event, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's sam@thegrapenation.com. Subscribe to the Grape Nation podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods. If you subscribe, the second Jancis's podcast is dropped, it's waiting for you. So why wouldn't you do that? So please subscribe. Follow us on Facebook at The Grape Nation. On Instagram, we're at SBenRuby. On Twitter, we're at BenRuby. But you can always get to us by way of the hashtag, The Grape Nation, on both. As I mentioned, I will post Jancis's wine list answers on our social media, so you will be able to see that. And finally, Jancis, we covered some of this along the way, but just let's make sure we cover everything. If people want to get involved or find out more about your stuff, what are the best ways? JancisRobinson.com is really, like I said, that main artery, your website, right?
That's the one, really. Yeah. And as I say, a lot of free material there, including if you click on Learn in the menu, all of that is free, and it's so much stuff.
Anything else that you want to? The Maestro series we talked about. We told people how to get to there. The glassware we talked about. Anything else?
You've done a wonderful job. Thank you.
Well, my background is in broadcasting, sales, and marketing, so I kind of get it. All right, so I want to thank our guest, Jancis Robinson. Jancis, it's a delight to talk to you. I could sit here, even though you wouldn't, for hours talking to you. Thank you, for doing this. Thank you for doing it again. We wish you safe travels and a good time, and hopefully that's a little respite from, what you've been doing. I want to thank our engineer, Matt, and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. I'm Sam Ben-Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation. One final word. Jancis is offering to all the Grape Nation listeners 10% off a monthly, annual, or gold subscription for the first year to jancisrobinson.com. Use code GRAPE10. That's capital letters GRAPE and the number 10. The Grape Nation is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find us at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be part of the food world's most innovative community? Subscribe to the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join the HRN family by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. And thanks for listening.